The wrap dress and wrap skirt are great iconic dress silhouettes that tend to lend towards, size versatility and comfort, and they're really quite easy to create. But if you are curious about how to draft your own pattern for creating a wrap style, that's what we're going to be talking about today for this week's Tricky Thursday. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Trisha. I'm the owner of Creative Costume Academy. I call myself your pattern nerd friend, and I'm so glad you're here in my corner of the internet today. We're going to talk about the wrap skirt specifically, but the very famous wrap dress has been quite popular recently, so I thought this would be a good topic. I searched my pattern stash and looked around. Since I draft most of my own patterns, I didn't have a lot, but I did see a couple. Now, this is not sponsored by any of these patterns. These are just a few things that I happened to find, so I thought I would share. It's always good to look at pattern resources or clothing resources that you might already have before you go into drafting your own styles, if it's a style that you haven't done before. But this one is really unique. This is a McCall's, 6587. It's an older one. I don't know. It's probably out of print. I get all these old patterns and I just have them. But if you notice, this is the wrap dress in the front, and then in the back, you have the option to wear it backwards, so it can wrap in the back. So it really doesn't matter where the wrap happens if you're wanting to get a little creative with the design. I have a student right now who is working on an interesting wrap dress design, and it's really a lot of fun. And you can really see it clearly in the back how they do this line art. So it's really very simple. So this is the back here, and then we have our front and we have our ties. This is where we're going to talk about the details of what does it mean and how does it function when you're designing a pattern. So here's another example, the Nomi 2006. This is the fabulous Nefertiti and her Nomi design. I love this design. It's not a wrap top or a wrap coat, but it's a double-breasted, which could very easily be turned into a wrap design. So I thought I would pull it out because, of course, I have my girl's Nef's pattern, and I thought I would give her a shout out. Another design that I have that was actually one of my girls, she let me borrow it. So this is an indie pattern called Tram A, I believe is the name of the company, the Modus wrap dress. So you can see here, it has that doubled over front, and we have the tie at the side. Here's the back. And when you look more at the instructions, you can see, again, it looks very similar to our first pattern that we were looking at, the McCall's, where it has a back piece, and then we have our front, and we have our front. And you'll notice there's a waistband on this. There's ties that are not in this picture, but there is an intentional hole. That hole, my friends, is the key. There's an actual hole in that side seam for when you've got the whole dress pattern. So you have that hole on the inside. So actually the hole's over here. This long tail will feed through that hole and wrap around the back. And then this is folded in, and then this will fold over and meet that has wrapped around the body and then tie at the side. And that's how you get this look, right? So this underside has gone through the side seam over here, wrapped around the back and tied here at the side. So this waistband here is just part of the front section, but it looks like it's a continuous belt. So that's the sneaky peekies design analysis of what a wrap does, right? So it's kind of like a double-breasted front. It doesn't have to go all the way to the side seams every time, but oftentimes the tie will go that far, and then it will wrap either on the outside or it feeds through from the front and goes inside and then comes back out and ties. So usually it goes, the underlap goes inside, comes out of the side, travels around the back and attaches to the overlap, which ties. And so these can be as tight or as loose as the wearer wants. So you have a little bit of versatility with the sizing. So it makes it a really great dress or a really great skirt that fits everyone. Today, I'm gonna be showing you from the lovely Helen Joseph Armstrong book, how to make your own wrap skirt if this is something that you're interested in. Now, if you want to turn it into a dress, you would just have a bodice that would match the skirt and do the same thing in the front where we're going to extend that front to the other side. So that is the only thing, but we're gonna focus on the skirt. So let's jump over the table. Before we do that, if you love this kind of thing, please hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications and share with your friends if you find this helpful. It really helps my channel and it helps me to keep going, keep producing those videos for you, so I know what you like, right? Let's dive into the table and get a closer look at how to do a wrap skirt. For this skirt, I am going to just use my basic sloper as I start with most patterns. And this is just a basic skirt sloper pattern. So it isn't A-line or anything fancy. You could definitely get more creative with your skirts. I have the student who's working on one now. She did one that was pleated. So anything like that, but let's start with the front first. Now, anytime that you have something that goes past the center front, like an asymmetrical design or an overlap like what we're doing in the wrap skirt design, I always like to make a full front. So I'm going to trace out this full front and show you why I think that's the best way. Once you have a full front, then you can kind of decide where you want that overlap to stop. Usually your overlap stops somewhere on the side front. So you can choose to go to this furthest dart or somewhere in the middle. You want enough overlap though that we're not going to split open as the wearer is walking. So I usually like to go a little farther than, halfway. So I'd probably go right around here. So I am going to make that my extension. So here is center front, and then I'm going to extend this skirt, making sure I'm square, all the way. So when it's overlapped, it will overlap another amount. So this is no longer part of my pattern. So that's my front skirt pattern. Now, when you do your back, there's really nothing fancy that happens with the back except you would cut it on a fold. You could, of course, have a seam center back, but there's really no need to because the opening is in the front. Or if you're going back to this McCall's pattern that we have, you could wear it either way. Notice there's no seams in this back part because it's all one piece. Also referencing that same design, notice how it's gathered here at the waist. Even though it's gathered in the bodice and in the skirt, we still have a stabilized waistline so that we have a set measurement that we're working with. And on this design, we can see that the skirt was gathered, but the bodice has darts in it and it's more fitted. So the bodice is keeping it, as well as the waistband that they used here, is keeping it in check so that the skirt can have gathers. So you can choose to keep these darts. I wouldn't keep the one in the extension, so I would just continue that and not have a dart there. But you could continue to have these front darts. This could still be a separate front piece and a back piece, and you would add seam allowance so you could sew all this together and, keep your back darts as well. Or if you wanted to do gathers, like I said, this could be a flare design or whatever you would like. But if you wanted to attach it and have it be all one piece, you could draw this on, have your folded back as well, or just say that this piece is on a fold and you cut this on a fold and keep this as a dart here. And then you have these darts here. Then your waist would be fitted with the darts. Or you could choose to make this more gathers. And the gathers would have to gather to what the measurement would be if all of these darts were closed, these darts and these seams were closed. That's just something to keep in mind because we're assuming that this sloper pattern fits who you're making this pattern for. So all of these darts and seams would be closed and that waist measurement would fit the person that we're making this skirt for. So we'll keep it simple for this one, but I just wanted to tell you options. And if you wanted a more full skirt and more gather, you could split this open and add more fullness. I have another video about adding fullness, but we'll just keep it as we have a side seam. We'll have our back that's separate. because I want to really show you how this all comes together with the paper. I'm not going to be adding seam allowance, but just so you get the idea. So this would be a cut to of front, and then we'll go ahead and trace off our back and then talk about the waistband. So for this particular design, I'm not doing anything fancy with the center back. I'm keeping it darted. We're going to keep the seam. And so I just copied it so that this is on a fold. I want to show you this full skirt and how it looks with the waistband. So that's why I'm doing these patterns. You could very well just say cut on fold, and that would be fine. And again, you can say that this is gathered. You could add more so that there's more gathered. This could be a full skirt. So many different design options. But for this simple wrap skirt I'm showing you, we're just going to keep the regular sloper. Now I'm going to cut out both the front and the back, and I'm going to cut out a little waistband so that I can help explain how we determine where the ties go, how long those ties are, and the magic hole. Now what I've got here is a full back. So this back is actually the whole thing, so it could be on fold, and then we have a front. So these would go together, and when you laid it all out, you would actually have another front on the other side. So this would be your whole skirt. Now, like what I was saying is this could be gathered. You could add more fullness in here. I'm going to keep it fitted for this. If you were going to make it gathered or full, I would want to take the actual waist measurement I am going for before I started adding all that fullness, like the McCall's design. But if you had the design like the Tram A indie pattern, then the bodice would set what that waistline would be. So the measurement that you really want is this center back to center front, including your extension, because that's the length of the belt that you need at your, at your very least on the fold, but you're also going to need ties. And how you determine how long those ties are gets a little confusing. So let's start to put this together. And this is what I do when I'm working on a tricky pattern and I'm not really sure if it's going to work. I put it together in paper. Now, like I said, I didn't add any dart roots or seam allowance to this so that I could show you this easily. So I'm going to use tape to sew in this way so that I can show you. So ready? So do you see what I did there? I have taped it all together as if it was sewn. So I've got my darts taped up here, and I've got my side seams taped up here. So this is how the skirt will act. We've got our center front and our center front. So you see how they overlap. This actually would probably be more like this, and your tie would go through at the side seam, come back around the back, and tie to a tie over here. So I really wanted you to see this now because it's all together and it's paper. It's not going to lay nice and flat for me. So let's just kind of pretend. I'll wrinkle it down so we can see. All right. So I just cut a big long strip so that you can see. So in determining how long your waistband is, and it would be really mindful to put some notches and some marks. And this is where it's important to know what the waist circumference is that you're wanting. On my overlap side, I need a long enough tail to tie a bow or tie something here. So let's say I'm going to give myself 8 inches. I'm thinking that will be enough. So that would be 4 inches in half scale, which is what we're doing right now. So I'm just going to put a notch right there. Then that would sew to here. Then it would go along and I could put a notch for where it hits my side seam. It's going to go along the back, so we need to know the full back measurement. It's got to go all the way to the other side seam. And continue all the way to the underlap. Now, once it's on the underlap, the tail that goes beyond that has to be long enough to thread through a hole and go wrap around and tie back with this. So let me tape this on so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Here we go. We have our overlap side with the extra tie. The waistband goes all the way around, and then it goes to our underlap side. Now, I have this extra long tail here because I would need to go through a hole. So let's just cut a hole here right at the side seam. So you would obviously not do this on your garment. You would do a clean buttonhole or something. But like I said, when I'm trying to figure things out, sometimes it's just easier to play with it in paper and see how it's going to work. So I'm going to thread my strap through the side seam, through a hole, and that's why we need the hole there. And this tie needs to be long enough to go around the back and come back to the front and to be able to tie. So that's how a wrap skirt works. And of course, if you had a bodice, it would just be a continuation of this. Now, of course, your bodice would have to have that front extension, and that's why they do the overlap or the double-breasted. And this could be gathered in all of this, and you have a little bit of leeway. So if you need to let this out a little bit, make that overlap not quite as overlapped, and the tie is a little smaller, you have that option without having to do any alterations to your pattern. So it's a really handy design that gives you a little bit of flexibility. So for your waistband, you want to know how much is going to be the tie on your overlap side. It needs to go to your full front, including the extension, your full back, your full other front, including the extension, and then the tie that's left on the other side will have to be long enough to go back around your back and connect to your other side front. So it needs to be longer over here. Now, this is a very long belt. You could divide it into sections, or like this indie pattern that they actually had the ties only on, this was a built-in waistband that was separate piece, and then they had a tie here, and then they had the tie that connected in the underlap. So the tie is going over that waistband here to tie to the other side. And it's a very short tie in this design. So the key here is having the tie on your overlap, an extra long tie on the other side, that is the underlap, having the hole in the garment so that the longer tie can go through, and having that extended front so that it can overlap on itself and close enough so that it's not going to open up with movement when the person's wearing it. So, not too crazy, just a lot of thinking about how this is going to end up as a pattern. And I know I made this look really easy with the tape, but it's actually, I think, harder to tape all this together. And remember, I'm showing you this pattern without seam allowance and all of that. And there's a lot of different options you can go with here. But here's the basic idea of how a wrap skirt or a wrap garment would work.
All right, now that wasn't so hard, was it? It really is just a matter of how do the pieces go together and that secret hole with the ties going around. That's the tricky part, but it's really not that tricky. I hope you found this a lot of fun. Maybe you will give a wrap skirt or wrap dress a try in the near future. And if you do, please come and tell us about it. I love to hear comments down below. Let me know what you think. And if you are curious in learning more about pattern making, I do offer a free pattern masterclass. You can find the link for that down below. Don't forget to come back and visit us for other Tricky Thursdays that you will find here on my channel. Until then, I'll see you later.